Hey guys, welcome to my new mystery.
There are exactly three things that can interrupt Nero Wolfe's sacred morning routine with his orchids: a fire, a felony, or Fritz announcing that the souffle has fallen. On that particular Thursday in October, it turned out to be none of the above, though by the time the morning was over, I was wishing it had been the fire. I was in the office catching up on correspondence when the delivery arrived at 10:47 a.m. The messenger was one of those efficient, anonymous types who treat packages like they're carrying state secrets, and the box he handed me was small enough to fit in my palm, but heavy enough to suggest something more substantial than the usual crank letters we get from people who think Wolfe can solve their neighbor's barking dog problem through pure deductive reasoning. The return address was printed in careful block letters. Dr. Helena Marsh, Orchid Research Institute, Columbia University. That got my attention. Wolfe had mentioned Dr. Marsh before. She was one of the few people in New York whose botanical expertise he actually respected, which put her in a category roughly the size of my little finger. Inside the box, nestled in tissue paper like a jewelry store diamond, was a small glass vial containing what looked like a single orchid seed. Attached to the vial with a thin silver wire was a card written in the same careful handwriting as the return address. Mr. Wolfe, this is Paphiopedilum thanatos, a hybrid I developed from your Paphiopedilum wardi and my own Paphiopedilum venustum. It will bloom exactly 72 hours after planting. When it does, someone will die. I need your help to prevent this. The fee is $50,000. I will call at 3 p.m. today. Dr. Helena Marsh. I read the note twice, then held the vial up to the light. The seed inside was dark, almost black, with tiny striations that caught the morning sun coming through the office windows. It looked innocent enough, but then again, so do most of the people who end up confessing to murder in Wolfe's office. At 11 o'clock sharp, I heard the familiar whir of the elevator descending from the plant rooms. Wolfe entered the office with his usual measured dignity, all 1/7 of a ton of him settling into his custom-made chair like a mountain finding its natural resting place. His morning inspection of 10,000 orchids had apparently gone well. There was no trace of the irritation that usually marked his features when Theodore had discovered aphids or some other botanical catastrophe. Good morning, Archie. I trust the morning's correspondence contains nothing that requires my immediate attention. Nothing urgent, I said, but we did receive an interesting delivery. I handed him the box and the note. Wolfe's reaction was immediate and fascinating to watch. His dark eyes fixed on the vial with the kind of intensity he usually reserved for a perfectly prepared meal or a particularly challenging crossword puzzle. He read Dr. Marsh's note once, then again, his eyebrows rising slightly, which for Wolfe was equivalent to jumping up and down with excitement. Paphiopedilum thanatos, he murmured, turning the vial carefully in his thick fingers. An ambitious name for a hybrid. Thanatos, the Greek personification of death. He looked up at me. Dr. Marsh has a flair for the dramatic. She also has $50,000 to spend on preventing a murder that supposedly coincides with a flower blooming, I pointed out. That's either very generous or very crazy. Or very desperate, Wolfe said quietly. He set the vial down on his desk with the care most people reserve for handling nitroglycerin. Dr. Helena Marsh is not given to flights of fancy, Archie. She is one of the most respected orchid researchers in the country. If she claims this hybrid will bloom in exactly 72 hours, I would not doubt her precision. If she claims someone will die when it does. He paused, his gaze returning to the dark seed. That suggests she has information we do not. Information that connects a flower blooming to someone getting killed, I said. That's a new one, even for us. Indeed. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced over his substantial middle. The connection is not supernatural, Archie. Dr. Marsh is a scientist, not a mystic. If she has created a hybrid that will bloom at a specific time, and if she believes that timing coincides with a planned murder, then someone has shared their schedule with her. The question is whether she is the intended victim or merely a witness to someone else's carefully orchestrated demise. The phone rang at exactly 3 p.m. as promised. I answered it and heard a woman's voice, crisp and professional with just a hint of strain around the edges. "Mr. Goodwin, this is Dr. Helena Marsh. I believe you received my package this morning." "We did, Doctor." "Marsh, Mr. Wolfe is very interested in your botanical prediction. May I come see him? I'm in a taxi outside your building." I looked at Wolfe, who nodded once. "Come right up, Doctor." Marsh. She was a woman in her 50s, tall and angular, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun and intelligent gray eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a navy wool coat that had seen better days and carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from spending years in academic environments where ideas matter more than appearances. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm and her fingers were stained with what I recognized as potting soil. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, taking the red leather chair I indicated. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." "Dr. Marsh." Wolfe inclined his head slightly. "Your hybrid is most intriguing. You claim it will bloom in precisely 72 hours? 69 hours and 13 minutes to be exact," she said, checking her watch. "I've been working with temperature and light manipulation to control blooming cycles. This particular specimen has been conditioned to bloom at exactly 2:47 p.m. on Sunday afternoon. And you believe someone will die at that moment?" Dr. Marsh opened her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. 3 days ago, I received this in my office mail." She handed Wolfe a sheet of expensive stationery with a message typed in the center. "Your hybrid will bloom Sunday at 2:47 p.m. At that exact moment, I will kill Dr. Marcus Webb. Thank you for providing such precise timing. A grateful colleague." Wolfe read the note, then looked up at her. "Dr. Marcus Webb. My research partner for the past 15 years, she said, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. "We've been working together on orchid hybridization techniques. Recently, we've had disagreements about the direction of our research. Marcus wants to commercialize our methods, license them to large agricultural companies. I believe our work should remain in the academic realm, freely shared with other researchers." "A common conflict in scientific partnerships," Wolfe observed, "but hardly grounds for murder. There's more." Dr. Marsh reached into her purse again and pulled out a small recorder. "Yesterday, I received this voicemail on my office phone." She pressed play, and an electronically distorted voice filled the office. "Dr. Marsh, I hope you appreciate the elegance of using your own hybrid as a timer for Dr. Webb's death. Sunday at 2:47 p.m., when your Thanatos opens its first bloom, Marcus Webb will take his last breath. Consider it a demonstration of precision in both horticulture and homicide." The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock. Wolfe stared at the recorder as if it had personally offended him. "You have informed the police?" he asked finally. "I tried," Dr. Marsh said. "They were skeptical. A threat based on the blooming schedule of an orchid hybrid doesn't fit their usual parameters for credible danger. They suggested I might be under stress from academic pressures." "And Dr. Webb? Have you warned him?" "I've tried to reach him, but he's been avoiding me since our last argument. He's supposed to give a presentation at the Horticultural Society meeting on Sunday afternoon, at 3 p.m. She looked directly at Wolfe. 13 minutes after my hybrid blooms. Wolfe was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from the recorder to the vial containing the dark seed, then back to Dr. Marsh. Finally, he spoke. "Your fee is acceptable, Doctor. Marsh, we will take the case. However, I have conditions. First, you will plant your hybrid here, in my plant rooms, under Theodore's supervision. Second, You will provide me with a complete list of everyone who knew about your blooming schedule experiment. Third, you will tell me everything about your disagreement with Dr. Webb. Every detail, every conversation, every person who might have overheard your discussions. Dr. Marsh looked relieved for the first time since she'd entered the office. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. I'll do whatever you need. Excellent. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, please escort Dr. Marsh to the plant rooms and introduce her to Theodore. Then return here. We have a murder to prevent, and less than 70 hours to do it. As I led Dr. Marsh toward the elevator, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just agreed to play a very dangerous game with someone who had already demonstrated an unsettling appreciation for precision timing. In my experience, people who plan murders around the blooming schedules of flowers tend to be the kind of careful, methodical killers who don't leave much to chance. But then again, they'd never had to deal with Nero Wolfe before. And if there was one thing I'd learned in my years working for him, it was that when someone threatened to disrupt the natural order of his carefully controlled world, especially when orchids were involved, they usually ended up regretting it. The question was whether we'd figure out who was behind the threat before Sunday at 2:47 p.m., when a dark flower would bloom, and, if Dr. Marsh was right, someone would die. If you want to see a man's true nature, watch him handle something more delicate than his ego. Theodore Horstmann, Wolfe's orchid nurse, treated the Paphiopedilum thanatos like it was made of spun glass and armed with a hair trigger. When I escorted Dr. Marsh up to the plant rooms at 11:15, Theodore was waiting with the expression he usually reserves for aphid infestations, alert, suspicious, and ready for battle. "The specimen," he said without preamble, eyeing the small container Dr. Marsh carried as if it might explode. "Conditioned for a 72-hour bloom cycle," she replied, matching his seriousness. "Temperature constant at 68 degrees, humidity at 70%, 12-hour photo period with full-spectrum LED supplementation." Theodore nodded once, which for him was equivalent to a standing ovation. He led us to a prepared bench in the intermediate room where monitoring equipment that looked like it belonged in a space program surrounded a single empty pot. Dr. Marsh opened her container with surgical precision, revealing a compact plant with glossy leaves and a single emerging bud sheathed in what looked like green silk. 47 hours and 36 minutes remaining, she murmured, checking her watch as Theodore positioned the plant under the lights. "The bud will begin to swell tomorrow morning, show color by Saturday evening, and open Sunday at exactly 2:47 p.m. "If your calculations are correct," Theodore said, attaching a humidity sensor to the pot's rim. "They are," Dr. Marsh replied with quiet confidence. "I've tested this protocol 17 times. The margin of error is less than 10 minutes. When we returned to the office, Wolfe was examining the morning mail with the concentration most people reserve for tax forms. He looked up as we entered, his dark eyes moving from Dr. Marsh to me with the kind of assessment that suggested he'd already reached several conclusions I hadn't thought of yet. "The plant is installed?" he asked. "Theodore has adopted it," I said. "I think he's already planning its biography." "Excellent. Dr. Marsh, you may return to your normal routine, but with modifications. You will not be alone between now and a Sunday evening. You will vary your schedule and routes, and you will inform me immediately of any unusual contacts or observations." She nodded and gathered her things. After she left, Wolfe leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, his thinking position. "Archie, we have been presented with a theatrical problem. Someone wishes to commit murder on a schedule, using Dr. Marsh's scientific precision as their timepiece. The question is whether they intend her as witness, accomplice, or scapegoat." "My money's on scapegoat," I said. "She's got motive, means, and now opportunity, all gift-wrapped with a botanical bow." "Indeed, which suggests our true murderer is both clever and vindictive. We must..." The doorbell interrupted his analysis. Through the front window, I could see a black sedan with university parking permits. I went to answer it and found myself facing a woman who looked like she'd been pressed in a business suit and starched for maximum efficiency. Mr. Goodwin, Dr. Clara Vance, head of Columbia's botany department. I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe about Helena Marsh's allegations. I showed her into the office, where she took the red leather chair without invitation and opened a briefcase that looked like it cost more than my monthly salary. "Mr. Wolfe," she began, her voice crisp as winter air, "I understand Dr. Marsh has retained your services regarding some supposed threat against Dr. Webb. I'm here to provide context that she may have omitted." Wolfe regarded her with the expression he usually reserved for interruptions during meals. "Context, Doctor." Vance: "Helena has been under considerable stress lately. Her opposition to our commercial partnership with Meridian Agricultural has put her at odds with the entire department. She's made several public statements questioning Marcus's professional integrity and threatening to sabotage our negotiations." "Threatening how?" Dr. Vance pulled out a folder. "These are copies of emails she sent to various faculty members over the past month. Note the increasingly hostile tone, the accusations of betrayal, the references to stopping Marcus by any means necessary." Wolfe accepted the folder but didn't open it. "You believe Dr. Marsh is the source of the threat against Dr. Webb?" "I believe she's a brilliant woman whose judgment has been compromised by stress and ideological rigidity. The timing of this supposed murder plot, coinciding with her own botanical experiment, seems remarkably convenient for someone who wants to create a public spectacle that would destroy our commercial negotiations." Before Wolfe could respond, the doorbell rang again. This time it was a nervous-looking man in tweed who introduced himself as Doctor. Alistair Finch, Webb's academic rival. He settled into the chair, Doctor. Vance had vacated and immediately began wringing his hands. "I heard Clara was here," he said, his right eye twitching. "Damage control, no doubt. She's been pushing this Meridian deal for months, despite significant faculty opposition." "Opposition from whom?" I asked. "Anyone with scientific integrity. Marcus and Helena's hybridization techniques represent 15 years of pure research. Meridian wants to patent the process and restrict access to other researchers. It's academic prostitution." "Strong words," Wolfe observed. "Not strong enough. But I didn't come here to discuss ethics. I came because Marcus is missing." That got our attention. Wolfe opened his eyes fully for the first time since Dr. Vance had left. "Missing how?" "He didn't show up for yesterday's faculty meeting, which is unprecedented. His office is locked, his phone goes to voicemail, and his wife says he never came home Wednesday night. The police have been notified, but they seem to think he's just avoiding the controversy." "What controversy?" Dr. Finch's eye twitched faster. "Beyond the Meridian deal, there's a former graduate student, Benjamin Carter, who's been sending Marcus threatening emails for months. Marcus destroyed the boy's career with plagiarism accusations, probably justified, but brutal nonetheless. Carter swore he'd get revenge." After Dr. Finch left, trailing anxiety and the scent of old books, Wolfe sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. "Archie, our problem has evolved. We began with a predicted murder and now have a missing victim. The question is whether Dr. Webb has been killed ahead of schedule, is hiding from his enemies, or has orchestrated his own disappearance for reasons we don't yet understand. Or whether someone's moved up their timeline," I suggested. "Maybe the Sunday deadline was misdirection." "Possible. Contact Inspector Kramer. Inform him that we have reason to believe, Doctor, Webb's disappearance is connected to a specific threat, and that the timing may be critical. Do not mention the Orchid. Let him deduce what he will. And then we accelerate our investigation. Arrange for Mr. Carter and the university's legal counsel, I believe his name is Sterling Thorne, to visit tomorrow, separately. I wish to observe their reactions to news of Dr. Webb's disappearance." As I reached for the phone, I glanced at the monitoring equipment Theodore had connected to track the orchid's progress. According to the digital display, the bud temperature had risen 2 degrees in the past hour, a sign that the blooming process was beginning right on schedule. 45 hours and counting until 2:47 p.m. Sunday. The question was whether we'd find Dr. Marcus Webb alive before then, or whether we'd be investigating his murder instead of preventing it. The brownstone felt different now, charged with the kind of tension that comes when someone decides to use your peaceful routine as the backdrop for their personal drama. But if there was one thing I'd learned in my years with Wolfe, it was that people who threatened the natural order of his carefully controlled world usually ended up regretting it. The orchid would bloom on schedule. Whether anyone would die when it did remained to be seen. Calling Inspector Kramer about a missing botanist whose disappearance might be connected to the blooming schedule of a genetically modified orchid is not a conversation I recommend having before your morning coffee. I made the call from the kitchen while Fritz was preparing lunch, hoping the familiar sounds of culinary precision might somehow make the whole situation sound less insane. "Goodwin," Kramer's voice came through the receiver like gravel being poured into a cement mixer. "What kind of botanical nonsense has Wolfe dragged you into now?" "No nonsense, Inspector. Dr. Marcus Webb, Columbia University botanist, missing since Wednesday night. His research partner received a credible threat indicating he'll be murdered Sunday at 2:47 p.m. 2:47 p.m. What kind of killer makes appointments? And what makes this threat credible?" I chose my words carefully. "It's connected to a very precise, scientifically verifiable timing mechanism, and Webb's disappearance certainly adds weight to the threat." "Timing mechanism," Kramer repeated flatly. "Let me guess. Some kind of fancy clock that only works when the moon is full and the daisies are dancing." "Something like that. Look, Inspector, we're not asking you to dispatch the cavalry. Just thought you should know that if a Columbia professor turns up dead Sunday afternoon, it won't be random." "We'll look into the missing person report," Kramer said with the enthusiasm of a man agreeing to audit his own tax returns. "But don't expect miracles based on your boss's horticultural hunches." After hanging up, I returned to the office where Wolfe was examining his morning mail with the concentration of a jeweler appraising diamonds. He looked up as I entered. Mr. Kramer was receptive to our concerns. About as receptive as a brick wall is to a love letter, but he'll investigate Webb's disappearance through normal channels. Adequate. Our first visitor should arrive momentarily. At precisely 2:00, Benjamin Carter slouched into our office like a man who'd been carrying the weight of academic injustice on his shoulders for so long he'd forgotten how to stand straight. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 28, with the pale, intense look that comes from spending too much time under fluorescent lights and not enough time remembering that the outside world exists. His dark hair needed cutting, his suit needed pressing, and his handshake needed more conviction than a campaign promise. "Mr. Carter," Wolfe said, settling into his chair with judicial dignity, "you are Dr. Webb's graduate student." "Former graduate student," Carter corrected, perching on the edge of the red leather chair like a bird ready to take flight. Marcus made sure of that. Destroyed my career based on accusations he couldn't prove, then made sure no other university would touch me. The plagiarism charges? Carter's laugh was bitter enough to curdle fresh cream. Alleged plagiarism. My dissertation research built on preliminary work Marcus had done years earlier. Unpublished work that existed only in lab notebooks. I developed new applications, created novel hybridization techniques, generated completely original data. But because I'd had access to his notes as his student, he claimed I'd stolen his ideas. "Had you?" Wolfe asked with the directness of a surgeon's scalpel. The question hung in the air while Carter's face flushed red, but his eyes stayed steady. "I built on his work, yes. That's how science progresses. But I created something entirely new. Marcus couldn't stand that his former student had improved on his methods and was getting recognition for it. So you sent him threatening emails. I sent him emails demanding he retract his accusations and restore my academic standing. When he ignored those, I sent emails expressing my frustration in terms that were perhaps undiplomatic. Such as, Carter shifted uncomfortably. I may have suggested that his professional reputation would eventually suffer the same fate he'd inflicted on mine, and I might have mentioned that people who destroy others' lives usually get what's coming to them. Where were you Wednesday evening? I asked. Working late at Helix Laboratories on 33rd Street. I do contract analysis work now. Clinical trials, quality control, boring stuff that pays the bills. The security guard can verify I was there until after 11 p.m. After Carter left, trailing resentment like a bad cologne, Wolfe sat in contemplative silence until our next appointment arrived. Sterling Thorne was everything Carter wasn't. Impeccably dressed, smoothly confident, and radiating the kind of controlled power that comes from years of turning legal complications into billable hours. He took the red leather chair like he'd been born to occupy it. "Mr. Wolfe," Thorne began, his voice modulated with courtroom precision. "I understand you're investigating some rather sensational claims regarding Dr. Webb. I assure you the university takes all threats to faculty seriously. Even those involving exotic horticulture," Wolfe murmured. Thorne allowed himself a faint smile. "The university is a large institution with diverse research programs. However, my primary concern is protecting the integrity of our partnership with Meridian Agricultural. Dr. Webb's disappearance, coupled with these unusual allegations, could jeopardize a multi-million-dollar agreement. Your role in this agreement? I drafted the contracts, negotiated terms, and secured intellectual property rights for the university. It represents significant funding for our research programs. Dr. Webb was instrumental in bringing it to fruition, and Dr. Marsh opposes it. Vehemently, she believes scientific research should remain pure, untainted by commercial interests. Noble, perhaps, but impractical. Dr. Webb understood the need for practical applications and sustainable funding. Were there other faculty members who opposed the Meridian deal? I asked. A few. Dr. Alistair Finch has always been skeptical of commercialization, but no one as vocal or disruptive as Dr. Marsh. Her opposition was becoming increasingly personal. Personal how? Thorne hesitated, then continued carefully. She made public statements questioning Marcus's professional integrity. She accused him of betraying their partnership for financial gain. At last month's faculty reception, she announced she would stop Marcus by any means necessary from proceeding with the deal. Strong words, Wolfe observed. Indeed. Combined with her expertise in creating precisely timed biological events. Thorne left the implication hanging. I trust you'll handle this matter discreetly, Mr. Wolfe. The university's reputation is at stake. Our third visitor arrived as Thorne was leaving. Dr. Clara Vance entered with the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to making decisions and having them obeyed. She was a handsome woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, taking the chair without invitation. "I felt I should provide additional context about Helena Marsh's recent behavior. She's been under considerable stress, and her judgment may be compromised." "In what way?" Dr. Vance opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "These are copies of emails Helena sent to various faculty members over the past month. Note the increasingly hostile tone, the accusations against Marcus, the references to stopping him by any means necessary." Wolfe accepted the folder but didn't open it. "You believe Dr. Marsh is the source of the threat against Dr. Webb?" "I believe she's a brilliant woman whose opposition to necessary progress has become an obsession. The timing of this supposed murder plot, coinciding precisely with her own botanical experiment, seems remarkably convenient." "Convenient for whom?" "For someone who wants to create a public spectacle that would destroy our negotiations with Meridian." Helena has made no secret of her desire to sabotage this deal. After Dr. Vance left, I summarized the afternoon's revelations for Wolfe. So we have a bitter ex-student with a grudge, a lawyer protecting $1 million deal, and a department head who thinks Dr. Marsh is orchestrating the whole thing. Plus, a missing victim who may or may not be hiding from his problems. Wolfe opened his eyes, which had been closed during my summary. Indeed, Archie, a tidy circle of suspects, each with plausible motives. Mr. Carter seeks revenge for his ruined career. Mr. Thorne wishes to protect a lucrative agreement. Dr. Vance wants to eliminate opposition to her commercial ambitions. And Dr. Marsh. Dr. Marsh has the scientific expertise to create the very instrument of timing for this predicted murder. She also has passionate opposition to the Meridian deal and, according to multiple witnesses, has made threats against Dr. Webb. He leaned back, his gaze drifting toward the plant rooms above. Yet something troubles me about this arrangement, Archie. The precision of the timing, the theatrical nature of the threat, the convenient alignment of motive and opportunity. It's almost too neat. You think someone's being set up. I think someone wishes us to reach certain conclusions. The question is whether those conclusions serve justice or merely convenience. He glanced at the Orchid monitoring equipment on his desk, where digital displays tracked the steady progress toward Sunday's 2:47 p.m. deadline. Contact Dr. Webb's wife tomorrow morning. I wish to understand the personal dynamics that may not be reflected in academic politics. You think there's a personal angle? There's always a personal angle, Archie. The question is whether it's hidden beneath the professional one, or whether the professional conflict is merely a screen for something more intimate and more dangerous. As I made notes for tomorrow's agenda, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were looking at a carefully constructed puzzle where each piece fit too perfectly. In my experience, real life is messier than that. When everything points in the same direction, it usually means someone's doing the pointing. The Orchid continued its inexorable countdown in the plant rooms above, 36 hours and 17 minutes until bloom time. Whether that would mark the moment of Dr. Webb's death or the revelation of someone else's elaborate deception remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. Sunday at 2:47 p.m. was going to be very interesting indeed. There are two kinds of mornings in the detective business. The kind where you drink coffee and read the paper, and the kind where you drink coffee and prepare to ask uncomfortable questions to people who'd rather not answer them. Friday morning fell squarely into the second category, especially after Wolfe handed me a list written in his precise block letters. Mrs. Webb, Columbia Laboratories. Webb's private activities. Report by 5. Comprehensive, I observed, tucking the list into my jacket pocket. Thorough, Wolfe corrected. We have 36 hours until Dr. Marsh's orchid blooms. If Dr. Webb is to die at that moment, someone has been planning this murder with scientific precision. I want to know who has that capability and that motivation. Mrs. Margaret Webb lived in a brownstone on East 74th Street that had the tired elegance of academic gentility. Good bones, worn upholstery, and the kind of quiet desperation that comes from years of stretching a professor's salary over Manhattan rent. She answered the door herself, a handsome woman in her late 40s with graying blonde hair and the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd been crying or expecting to. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, leading me into a living room lined with botanical journals and family photographs. "You're investigating Marcus's disappearance?" Among other things. The police seem to think he'll turn up on his own. "The police," she said with quiet bitterness, "don't know my husband. Marcus doesn't disappear without reason. He's methodical about everything. His research, his schedule, his relationships." The pause before relationships was loaded with enough meaning to sink a battleship. I waited. "Marcus has been having an affair," she said finally, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. "I've known for months. Late-night phone calls, mysterious meetings, credit card charges for restaurants I've never been to. The usual signs of a man who thinks he's being clever. Do you know who? I suspect it's someone from the university. The calls always came from campus numbers, and his mysterious absences coincided with academic conferences. She walked to a bookshelf and pulled out a photo album. There's a graduate student, Sarah Chen, who's been working very closely with him on the Meridian project. Very bright, very ambitious, and very attractive. She showed me several photographs from university functions. In most of them, Dr. Webb stood close to a young Asian woman with intelligent eyes and the kind of smile that suggested she knew more than she was telling. Sarah Chen has been his research assistant for 2 years. Mrs. Webb continued. She's been working late in his laboratory, most evenings, according to the security logs I've managed to see. You've been checking security logs. I'm not just a faculty wife, Mr. Goodwin. I have a doctorate in chemistry and consulting relationships with several pharmaceutical companies. When my husband started behaving suspiciously, I used my professional contacts to investigate. What did you find? Mrs. Webb's expression hardened. That Marcus has been conducting unauthorized research using university resources. He's been developing commercial applications of his hybrid techniques without proper approval or documentation. The Meridian deal isn't just about licensing existing research. It's about legitimizing work he's been doing illegally for months. She handed me a manila folder. These are photocopies of financial records and research notes I found in his study. Marcus has been selling preliminary data to agricultural companies in violation of his university contracts. Who else knows about this? Sarah Chen is his primary collaborator. Clara Vance has been providing administrative cover. Sterling Thorne has been handling the legal complications, and Benjamin Carter discovered it during his graduate research, which is why Marcus destroyed his career. After leaving Mrs. Webb with promises to keep her informed, I drove to Columbia University. The botany department occupied a Gothic revival building that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed scientific research should be conducted in an atmosphere of medieval gloom. I found Dr. Marsh in her laboratory, bent over a microscope with the concentration of a jeweler examining a diamond. She looked up as I entered, her silver hair catching the light from a bank of grow lamps. "Mr. Goodwin," she said without surprise. "I assume you're here about Marcus's disappearance. Among other things, can you tell me about Sarah Chen?" Dr. Marsh's expression tightened. Marcus's research assistant, a brilliant young woman who's been working very closely with him on commercial applications of our hybrid techniques. How closely? Close enough that she understands his work better than I do, apparently. The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. Marcus ended our professional partnership and our personal relationship 6 months ago. He said Sarah brought fresh perspectives to his research. Personal relationship? Dr. Marsh walked to her desk and pulled out a folder. Marcus and I were lovers for nearly a year. It began as professional collaboration and became intimate. When he started his affair with Sarah, he terminated both relationships with clinical precision. She handed me several printed emails. The early messages were purely professional, but the tone gradually became more personal, then intimate, then angry. The final exchange, dated 2 weeks ago, was particularly revealing. Webb to Marsh. "Helena, what we had was a mistake that jeopardized both our careers. Sarah understands my work in ways you never could. Stop trying to sabotage the Meridian deal out of personal jealousy." Marsh to Webb. "You're right, Marcus. What we had was a mistake, but destroying it won't be." "So the threat against his life," I began. "Is real," Dr. Marsh said firmly, "but not from me. I loved Marcus, despite his betrayal. I wouldn't hurt him. Then who would? Someone who discovered his illegal research activities and is using my Orchid experiment as a cover for murder. Marcus has made powerful enemies, Mr. Goodwin. People who don't appreciate being cheated. Before leaving Columbia, I made one more stop. Mrs. Webb had mentioned that her husband kept a private greenhouse in New Jersey, a detail that seemed worth investigating. The address led me to a quiet rural area in Bergen County, where a simple glass structure sat behind a modest house surrounded by fields. The greenhouse was locked, but locks have never been much of an obstacle in my line of work. Inside, the air was warm and humid, heavy with the scent of exotic blooms. Rows of orchids lined the benches, not commercial hybrids, but rare species collected for their beauty and challenge. On a small desk in the corner, I found what I was looking for, a leather-bound notebook that looked more like a personal diary than a scientific log. The entries were brief but revealing. November 12th. Helena's accusations are getting dangerous. She could destroy everything if she keeps pushing. December 5th. Benjamin's threats are escalating. He's unhinged. Need to protect myself and Sarah. January 15th. The Meridian deal is more complicated than Clara admits. Sterling is hiding something. Don't trust either of them completely. February 20th. She knows about the unauthorized research. The secret is out. This will ruin me and Sarah. The final entry was dated Wednesday, the day Webb disappeared. Meeting tonight to resolve this. If something happens to me, Sarah has copies of everything. The truth is in the locked cabinet. I searched the greenhouse but found no locked cabinet. Either Webb had moved it or someone else had gotten there first. By the time I returned to the brownstone, it was nearly 5 o'clock. Wolfe was in his chair, examining the afternoon mail with judicial concentration. He looked up as I entered. Well, I gave him the complete report. Mrs. Webb's revelations about the affair and illegal research, Dr. Marsh's admission of her romantic involvement with Webb, the discovery of Sarah Chen as both collaborator and lover, and the cryptic diary entries from the private greenhouse. Wolfe listened without interruption, his dark eyes growing more thoughtful as the complications multiplied. So we have a love triangle involving Dr. Marsh, Dr. Webb, and Miss Chen, he said finally. We have illegal research activities that could destroy careers and violate federal regulations, and we have a commercial deal worth millions of dollars that depends on Webb's continued cooperation. Plus a bitter ex-student who discovered the illegal research, a department head who's been providing cover, and a lawyer who's been managing the legal complications. Indeed. And now Dr. Webb has vanished after a meeting intended to resolve an unspecified crisis. Wolfe glanced at the Orchid monitoring equipment on his desk. 31 hours until the predicted moment of death. The question is whether we're preventing a murder or investigating one that has already occurred. What's our next move? Contact Miss Chen immediately. I want to see her tomorrow morning. Also arrange for Inspector Kramer to visit us tomorrow afternoon. If Dr. Webb is found dead, the police will need to understand the complexity of motives involved. As I reached for the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were racing against more than just the blooming schedule of an exotic orchid. Somewhere in the tangled web of academic ambition, personal betrayal, and commercial greed, a killer was counting down the hours to Sunday at 2:47 p.m. The question was whether they were counting down to murder or to the revelation of one already committed. There are violations that announce themselves with broken glass and splintered wood, and there are violations that whisper their presence through details so minute that only the most observant eye would notice them. Saturday morning brought us the second kind, and in some ways it was far more unsettling than the first would have been. I was in the office reviewing my notes from the previous day's interviews when Theodore descended from the plant rooms with the expression of a man who had discovered someone had been rearranging his personal effects. His usual composed demeanor was replaced by a barely controlled agitation that immediately caught my attention. "Mr. Wolfe," Theodore announced without preamble. "Someone has been in the intermediate room." Wolfe, who had been examining the morning mail with judicial concentration, looked up sharply. The sanctity of his plant rooms was not a matter he took lightly. "Explain." "The Paphiopedilum thanatos," Theodore said, his voice tight with professional indignation. "It has been moved, not dramatically, perhaps a quarter-inch clockwise rotation. But I positioned that plant precisely yesterday, aligned with the bench seam for optimal light distribution. Someone has disturbed it." "Are you certain?" I asked, though I knew better than to question Theodore's botanical precision. "Absolutely certain. Moreover, the monitoring equipment shows a brief humidity fluctuation at approximately 11:15 last night, a spike that lasted exactly 7 minutes. And there's this." He handed Wolfe a small plastic plant label. "Someone replaced my identification tag with this one." Wolfe examined the tag carefully. Where Theodore's neat printing had simply read Paphiopedilum thanatos, the new label specified Paphiopedilum thanatos, 2:47 p.m. Sunday. The precision was unmistakable, down to the exact second of the predicted bloom time. "This is not your handwriting," Wolfe observed. "Nor would I ever label a plant with such temporal specificity," Theodore replied. "The original tag is here." He produced the discarded label from his pocket. Clean, no residue, carefully removed. Wolfe's expression darkened with the kind of quiet fury that comes when someone violates the natural order of his carefully controlled world. "Was anything else disturbed?" "A superficial nick on the bud sheath, barely visible but precisely placed. It appears to be a test cut, perhaps to determine whether damage would affect the blooming schedule." The implications were clear and deeply troubling. Someone had not only gained access to the brownstone during the night, but had specifically targeted the orchid that served as the centerpiece of our investigation. The message was unmistakable. We were being watched, and our adversary was confident enough to leave calling cards. "Archie," Wolfe said quietly, "check my desk." The original threat letter Dr. Marsh brought us. "Examine it carefully." I went to the pigeonhole where Wolfe had filed the typed message and found it exactly where it should be. But when I compared it to my memory of the original, something was wrong. The paper was different, cheaper stock without the watermark I remembered from the expensive stationery. "It's been replaced," I reported. "Same text, different paper. Our visitor took the original and left a copy." Indeed. Someone wished to remove evidence that could be traced while ensuring we retained the message itself. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced over his substantial middle. "We are dealing with someone who appreciates precision, Archie. The plant rotation, the timing label, the document substitution, all calculated to demonstrate capability while advancing their agenda." At precisely 10:30, Sarah Chen arrived for her scheduled interview. She was younger than her photographs suggested, with the kind of understated intelligence that comes from years of academic discipline. Her navy wool coat and practical demeanor suggested someone accustomed to laboratory work, but her nervous energy indicated she was carrying more than scientific equipment. "Miss Chen," Wolfe began after she had settled into the red leather chair, "you were Dr. Webb's research partner." "Research assistant," she corrected, then paused, "though our relationship became more than professional. I suppose that's relevant to your investigation." "Indeed it is. You are aware of Dr. Webb's unauthorized research activities." Her composure faltered slightly. "Marcus believed the university bureaucracy would kill our research with committee reviews and administrative delays. He wanted to develop practical applications quickly before other laboratories could duplicate our techniques. So you participated in violations of federal research regulations." "The science was sound," she said defensively. "Our hybrid techniques could revolutionize agricultural production." Marcus felt the potential benefits justified the procedural shortcuts. "And where is Dr. Webb now?" "I don't know." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "He called Wednesday evening and said he had a meeting to resolve complications with the Meridian deal. He seemed confident he could handle everything, but I never heard from him again." After Sarah Chen left, I found myself puzzling over something that had been bothering me throughout the interview. Her answers had been too prepared, too careful. She was holding back information, and I suspected she had her own agenda for visiting us. My suspicion was confirmed an hour later when I discovered an envelope that hadn't been there before our interview. It was addressed to Wolfe in the same careful handwriting as Dr. Marsh's original package, but the return address read S. Chen, Columbia University Botany Department. Inside was a brief note. Mr. Wolfe, if something happens to Marcus, look in the locked cabinet in his private greenhouse. The combination is Helena's birthday, April 15th, 1971. The truth is there. Sarah. She came here to give us this information without directly implicating herself, I observed, handing Wolfe the note. Miss Chen is more calculating than she appeared. Wolfe agreed. This suggests she expects something unfortunate to happen to Dr. Webb, or knows it already has. The drive to Webb's private greenhouse in Bergen County took me through Saturday afternoon traffic that moved with all the urgency of a philosophical discussion. When I arrived, the glass structure looked exactly as I'd left it the day before, but the air inside felt different, warmer, more humid, charged with the kind of tension that comes when secrets are about to be revealed. I found the locked cabinet exactly where Sarah's note had indicated, hidden behind a bank of grow lights in the corner of the greenhouse. The combination she'd provided opened it easily, revealing 2 manila folders and a leather-bound journal that looked more like a personal diary than a scientific log. The first folder contained financial records that painted a damning picture of Webb's illegal activities. Payment records from 3 different agricultural companies showed substantial sums for preliminary research data, enough money to fund years of unauthorized research and provide a comfortable supplement to a professor's salary. The second folder was even more revealing. It contained correspondence with Meridian agricultural executives that made clear the company had not only known about Webb's violations, but had been actively encouraging them. The deal they were negotiating wasn't about licensing existing research. It was about legitimizing stolen work and providing legal cover for federal violations. But it was Webb's personal journal that provided the most shocking revelations. His final entries revealed a man increasingly trapped by his own deceptions. March 18th. Clara and Sterling know more than they're admitting. I think they've been using my research for their own purposes. The Meridian deal was their idea from the beginning. March 22nd. Sarah is getting scared. She wants to confess everything, but it's too late for that. This conspiracy goes deeper than any of us realized. March 25th. Someone has been planning this for months. They knew about Helena's Orchid experiment and have been using it as a timeline. I think I know who, but I may be too late to stop them. The final entry, dated Wednesday, was particularly chilling. Meeting tonight with all parties. If something happens to me, the evidence is in this cabinet. The killer is someone who understood Helena's precision and decided to use it for their own theatrical purposes. I was photographing the documents when I heard footsteps outside the greenhouse. Through the glass walls, I could see a figure approaching. Someone moving with a kind of deliberate purpose that suggested they knew exactly what they were looking for. I slipped behind a bank of tall orchids just as the door opened. The visitor was Dr. Clara Vance, and she was carrying a canvas bag that suggested she'd come prepared for more than casual observation. She moved directly to the cabinet, found it open and empty, and began a systematic search of the entire greenhouse. Her desperation was evident in every movement. The composed department head I'd met at the brownstone was gone, replaced by someone whose carefully constructed facade was cracking under pressure. She was looking for something specific, and she was running out of time to find it. After 20 minutes of fruitless searching, Dr. Vance left as quietly as she'd arrived. I waited another 10 minutes before emerging from my hiding place, my mind racing with the implications of what I'd witnessed. When I returned to the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair reading a botanical journal with the concentration of a scholar examining ancient manuscripts. He looked up as I entered, his dark eyes immediately focusing on the manila folders I carried. "Doctor, Vance made an appearance at the greenhouse," I reported. She knew exactly where to look and was very disappointed to find the cabinet empty. Indeed, which confirms she was aware of Dr. Webb's hidden records. Wolfe accepted the folders and began examining their contents with methodical precision. After 20 minutes of silent reading, he looked up with the expression of a man who had just solved a particularly challenging puzzle. "We now understand the full scope of the conspiracy, Archie. Dr. Webb was not simply conducting unauthorized research. He was being manipulated by people who intended to profit from his violations while ensuring he would bear full responsibility for them. A setup from the beginning? Precisely. Someone has been orchestrating this situation for months, using Dr. Webb's personal weaknesses and professional ambitions to create the perfect scapegoat. Dr. Marsh's Orchid experiment provided the theatrical element they needed for their finale. So who's pulling the strings?" Wolfe glanced at the monitoring equipment tracking the Orchid's progress towards Sunday's deadline. "Someone with access to Dr. Marsh's research, detailed knowledge of Dr. Webb's illegal activities, and the patience to construct an elaborate frame. Someone who benefits from Webb's death and Marsh's disgrace." He paused, his gaze moving from the folders to the replaced plant label Theodore had brought down from the intermediate room. "Someone who appreciated the precision of Dr. Marsh's scientific method enough to use it as the timing mechanism for murder. 24 hours and 17 minutes until the orchid bloomed. The question was whether we'd identify the puppet master before then, or whether Sunday at 2:47 p.m. would bring the culmination of someone's very carefully orchestrated revenge. The subtle trespass had been more than a violation of our sanctuary. It had been a declaration of war. Someone had demonstrated they could reach into the heart of Wolfe's domain and leave their mark with surgical precision. But if there was one thing I'd learned in my years working for Nero Wolfe, it was that people who threatened the natural order of his carefully controlled world usually ended up regretting it. The question was whether their regret would come before or after they completed their deadly schedule. There's a difference between being watched and being hunted. Being watched means someone wants to know what you're doing. Being hunted means they've already decided what they're going to do about it. By Saturday afternoon, I had the distinct impression we'd graduated from the first category to the second. The morning started quietly enough. Theodore came down from the plant rooms at 11 with his daily report and the expression of a man who had been personally insulted by the laws of physics. "Color development proceeding on schedule," he announced. "The bud shows deep purple striations. Temperature is stable, and if no further interference occurs, it will open at precisely 2:47 p.m. tomorrow." "That's a big if," I observed. "Indeed," Wolfe said, looking up from his examination of Webb's financial records. "Archie, we have been under observation since yesterday. A white panel van, 3 doors down, with Tri-State Exterminators painted on the side. The driver changes shifts, but the surveillance continues." I glanced out the front window. The van was there, all right, looking about as inconspicuous as a rhinoceros in a flower garden. "Want me to take a stroll past it?" "Not yet. First, contact Mr. Panzer. I want to know who is paying for our watchers." Before I could reach for the phone, it rang. Inspector Kramer's voice came through the receiver like gravel being poured into a cement mixer. "Goodwin," he growled. "Your missing botanist turned up." Sort of. Sort of. We found his car in the Hudson River near the 79th Street boat basin. Been there since Wednesday night, according to the Marine unit. No body yet, but there's blood on the driver's seat and signs of a struggle. Wolfe's eyebrows rose slightly. "How much blood, Mr. Kramer?" "Enough to suggest serious injury. Not enough to indicate death at the scene. The medical examiner thinks Webb was injured elsewhere. Then the car was driven to the river and pushed in." Have you examined Dr. Webb's private greenhouse? How did you... Never mind. Yes, we found it. Someone got there before us. The place had been cleaned out professionally. Safe was opened with precision tools, no fingerprints, no obvious traces. After Kramer hung up, I called Saul Panzer. Within an hour, he'd traced the van's registration through a maze of shell companies that eventually led back to Sterling Thorne's law firm. Our legal eagle was apparently more interested in surveillance than subpoenas. Thorne's people are watching us, I reported to Wolfe. The question is whether they're protecting their interests or preparing to eliminate them. Both, I suspect. Wolfe glanced at the Orchid monitoring equipment on his desk. 27 hours until the bloom. Someone is running out of time to tie up loose ends. As if summoned by his words, the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and saw a delivery man holding a package. Nothing unusual about that, except for the fact that Fritz wasn't expecting any deliveries, and the man's hands were shaking slightly as he held the box. I opened the door just enough to take the package. It was heavier than it looked, and there was something about the way it was wrapped. Too carefully, too precisely, that triggered every alarm bell I'd developed in my years working for Wolfe. Package for Mr. Wolfe, the delivery man said, his voice muffled by a surgical mask that seemed unnecessary for a simple delivery. I carried the box into the office, where Wolfe immediately noticed what I had missed. A faint chemical odor seeping from the package. "Archie," he said sharply, "take that to the basement immediately. Do not open it. Place it in the incinerator and burn it. Then wash your hands thoroughly." His urgency was unmistakable. I didn't argue. The box went into the incinerator, and I fired it up. As the flames consumed whatever was inside, the chemical smell intensified briefly, then vanished. When I returned to the office, Wolfe was wiping down the corner of his desk with a damp cloth, his expression grim. "That," he said, "was a highly concentrated plant desiccant, a chemical agent designed to rapidly dehydrate and kill plant life. Had it been opened in the plant rooms, it would have devastated Theodore's collection within minutes. The implications hit me like a cold shower. Someone tried to poison your orchids. More than that, someone demonstrated their capacity to strike at the heart of this house, at my most cherished possessions. They are escalating from observation to direct action." Within an hour, Saul Panzer was sitting in the red leather chair, his lean frame relaxed, but his eyes alert. Wolfe had summoned him with the kind of urgency he usually reserved for threats to his dinner schedule. "Mr. Panzer," Wolfe began, "we require comprehensive surveillance on Dr. Clara Vance, Mr. Sterling Thorne, and Miss Sarah Chen. I want to know their movements, their contacts, and any unusual behavior. Pay particular attention to any attempts to dispose of materials or contact unknown parties." "And the second job?" Saul asked, because he always knew there was a second job. "Tonight, you will observe this house from within. Someone has demonstrated the capability to deliver packages to our door and to monitor our activities. I believe they may attempt a more direct recovery of the documents we now possess." Saul's smile was predatory. "Inside surveillance, I like it. Any particular vantage point?" "You may choose your position. Just ensure that whoever attempts entry is observed and identified. I want information, not confrontation." After Saul left to begin his preparations, I found myself examining the office with new eyes. If someone was bold enough to send chemical weapons to the brownstone, what else might they be capable of? The answer came at 6 o'clock, when Fritz discovered something that made my blood run cold. He was dusting Wolfe's desk lamp when he noticed a faint electronic hum that hadn't been there before. "Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said, his voice carefully controlled. "This lamp makes a sound like a bad radio." I unscrewed the base and found what I was looking for. A small electronic device, no bigger than a quarter, attached to the lamp's wiring with magnetic clamps. A listening device, professionally installed and nearly invisible. "Leave it," Wolfe said when I started to remove it. "If our adversary wishes to listen, we will provide them with something worth hearing. For the next hour, we conducted a carefully orchestrated performance for our electronic audience. Wolfe announced his intention to move the orchid to a different room to delay its blooming, mentioned plans to deliver evidence to Inspector Kramer, and discussed security arrangements that were completely fictional. If they believe our timeline has changed, Wolfe explained after we'd finished our theatrical presentation, they may reveal themselves by attempting to adjust their own schedule. As evening approached, the brownstone felt different, charged with the kind of tension that comes when a sanctuary becomes a battleground. Saul had positioned himself in the front room with a clear view of all approaches. The listening device continued its electronic eavesdropping, and somewhere in the darkness outside, our watchers maintained their vigil. At 9 o'clock, the phone rang. I answered it and heard the same electronically distorted voice that had been on Dr. Marsh's original recording. "Mr. Goodwin," the voice said, "I trust you've been enjoying our little gifts. Tomorrow at 2:47 p.m., when Dr. Marsh's orchid opens its first bloom, the final act of this drama will begin. I suggest you be present to witness the culmination of months of careful planning." "Where?" I asked, but the line had already gone dead. "Our theatrical friend," Wolfe observed, confirming tomorrow's schedule despite our misdirection, which suggests they have independent verification of the orchid's progress. Someone with access to the plant rooms? Or someone with their own botanical expertise? Dr. Marsh is not the only person capable of predicting an orchid's blooming schedule. As I prepared for what promised to be a very long night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were approaching the climax of something much larger than a simple murder case. The chemical attack, the listening device, the professional surveillance, these were the tools of people who played for much higher stakes than academic politics. 22 hours until the orchid bloomed. 22 hours until someone's carefully orchestrated plan reached its deadly conclusion. The question was whether we'd be preventing a murder or walking into a trap that had been months in the making. But one thing was certain. Sunday at 2:47 p.m. was going to be very educational indeed. If you've never watched Nero Wolfe orchestrate a battle from his chair, it's like watching a conductor direct an orchestra he can't see, using instruments that don't know they're playing his music. By Sunday morning, with less than 6 hours until the Paphiopedilum thanatos would bloom, the brownstone had become the command center for what promised to be the most precisely timed confrontation in my experience. Theodore descended from the plant rooms at 8:30 with the expression of a man who had been personally appointed to witness scientific history. The orchid was approaching its moment with the inexorable precision that had made it the centerpiece of someone's murderous timeline. "Color development is complete," he announced. "Deep purple sepals with silver striations, fully swollen bud, optimal environmental conditions maintained. 6 hours and 17 minutes until bloom time. Barring catastrophic interference, it will open at exactly 2:47 p.m. Wolfe nodded with the satisfaction of a chess master whose pieces were finally positioned for checkmate. "Excellent, Theodore. Please ensure the plant rooms remain secure and maintain your vigil. Today's performance requires perfect timing." After Theodore returned to his botanical sanctuary, Wolfe turned his attention to the morning's strategic campaign. The listening device in his desk lamp hummed its electronic presence, a tiny ear waiting to transmit every carefully chosen word to whoever had planted it. Wolfe intended to give them something worth hearing. "Archie," he said, his voice carrying clearly to our unseen audience, "we have reached the critical phase. The documents from Dr. Webb's greenhouse reveal a conspiracy far more extensive than simple academic rivalry. We now know the full scope of the unauthorized research, the federal violations, and most importantly, who stands to profit from Dr. Webb's permanent silence." I settled into my chair, recognizing the opening notes of what would be a carefully orchestrated performance. The question is whether our theatrical friend realizes how much we've uncovered. Those financial records paint a pretty damning picture of the Meridian deal. Indeed, which brings us to this morning's agenda. Wolfe opened his desk drawer and pulled out a list written in his precise block letters. We shall apply pressure at precisely calculated points. Each of our suspects believes they understand their position in this drama. It is time to demonstrate how mistaken they are. The first call went to Sterling Thorne. I dialed his home number and waited through 3 rings before his smooth voice answered. "Mr. Thorne," I said, "Mr. Wolfe needs to consult with you regarding the legal implications of Dr. Webb's research violations. The documents we recovered from his private greenhouse suggest the university's culpability in the Meridian deal is more extensive than anyone realized." The pause on the other end was brief but telling. "What sort of documents, Mr. Goodwin?" "Financial records, correspondence with agricultural companies, evidence of unauthorized data sales." "Mr. Wolfe believes your firm's involvement in legitimizing these activities could constitute a serious conflict of interest. He'd like to discuss the potential federal implications before we're forced to share this information with the authorities." "I see. When would be convenient?" "This afternoon at 2 o'clock. Mr. Wolfe is gathering all interested parties for what he calls a comprehensive resolution of the matter." After I hung up, Wolfe nodded approvingly. "Mr. Thorne will spend the morning calculating damage control strategies. Now, Dr. Vance." The call to Dr. Vance was tailored with surgical precision. "Doctor." "Vance," I began when she answered. "Mr. Wolfe has uncovered some troubling discrepancies in the university's oversight of Dr. Webb's research activities. The evidence suggests systematic administrative cover for federal violations, and he's concerned about the institutional liability this represents." Her voice was crisp, but I could hear the tension underneath. "What evidence?" "Internal memos with your initials, correspondence regarding compliance mitigation, financial records showing unauthorized payments. Mr. Wolfe feels the university's reputation could be seriously damaged if this information becomes public without proper context." "I'll be there at 2, she said, and hung up with the sharp click of someone who was already planning her defense. The third call went to Sarah Chen. "Miss Chen, Mr. Wolfe has discovered that your name appears frequently in Dr. Webb's private records. He believes you may be in more danger than you realize, and he wants to ensure your protection before the situation escalates further." "What kind of danger?" Her voice was tight with fear. "The kind that comes from knowing too much about other people's crimes." 2 o'clock this afternoon, Miss Chen. Mr. Wolfe insists on your presence for your own safety." While I was making the calls, Saul Panzer materialized in the doorway with the silent efficiency that made him invaluable for surveillance work. He handed Wolfe a manila folder and settled into the chair across from my desk. "Overnight developments," Saul reported. "The white van was replaced by a black SUV at midnight. 2 occupants, professional surveillance equipment, direct line of sight to your front door. At 3:17 a.m., a dark sedan with untraceable plates pulled up for exactly 3 minutes. Someone got out, approached the gate, studied the house, then returned to the car. They're assessing our security posture," Wolfe observed. "What else?" "This morning, I followed Dr. Vance to a meeting at Sterling Thorne's office. 47 minutes, heated discussion visible through the windows, no audio. After she left, Thorne made 3 phone calls from his private line. Saul opened the folder and pulled out several photographs, and I found this in the evidence locker at the precinct. The photos showed orchid petals scattered in the front seat of Webb's recovered car. Fresh Paphiopedilum wardi petals, according to the police botanist. Same species Dr. Marsh used to create her hybrid. Wolfe studied the photograph with the concentration of a jeweler examining a flawed diamond. So, Doctor, Webb was killed in a location where such orchids were readily available. His private greenhouse, most likely. That's not all, Saul continued. He pulled out another photograph, this one showing a man placing something under an auditorium seat. Yesterday morning, someone installed a device in the Horticultural Society lecture hall. 3rd row, center seat. The timestamp shows 10:03 a.m. The implications were immediately clear. Someone had been planning to use the Society's afternoon lecture as the venue for their theatrical finale, probably intending to kill Webb during his scheduled presentation. His disappearance had forced them to adjust their plans, but the basic timeline remained unchanged. "Excellent work, Mr. Panzer," Wolfe said. "Please contact the Horticultural Society immediately. Inform them anonymously that their afternoon program should be canceled due to a credible security threat. Then position yourself to observe their response." After Saul left, Wolfe leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, his thinking position. When he opened them again, his expression was grimly satisfied. "We now understand the full scope of our adversary's plan, Archie. They intended to kill Dr. Webb during his public presentation, using Dr. Marsh's precisely timed orchid bloom as their theatrical flourish. His disappearance forced them to relocate the performance, but they remain committed to the 2:47 p.m. schedule. So where's the new venue? Here, of course. They have been maneuvering us into position for weeks, using threats and surveillance to ensure our involvement. We are not investigating this case, Archie. We are performing in it." The phone rang at 11:30. I answered it and heard Sarah Chen's voice, strained with barely controlled panic. "Mr. Goodwin, I need to see Mr. Wolfe immediately. I have something that changes everything." She arrived within 20 minutes, carrying a manila envelope with trembling hands. She took the red leather chair and immediately began her revelation. "Yesterday morning, I found this in my apartment mailbox," she said, handing Wolfe the envelope. "No postmark, no return address." Inside was a single photograph showing Dr. Webb's body lying among orchid plants in what was clearly his private greenhouse. The timestamp read, Wednesday, 11:47 p.m., the night he disappeared. "Someone wanted me to know he was dead," Sarah continued, "and they wanted me to know where. The photo shows Marcus lying next to a bench of Paphiopedilum wardi plants." Wolfe examined the photograph with judicial concentration. High resolution, professional lighting, careful composition. This was not taken hastily or accidentally. Someone wished to create a permanent record of their work. "But why send it to me?" "Because you were Dr. Webb's closest collaborator and most obvious suspect. Someone wanted you to know that the murder had already occurred, that this Sunday deadline was merely theatrical timing for the revelation." At noon, the doorbell announced Sterling Thorne's arrival. He entered with the controlled confidence of a man who had spent the morning preparing for battle, his expensive suit and practiced demeanor suggesting someone accustomed to legal warfare. "Mr. Wolfe," he began, settling into the red leather chair, "I understand you have concerns about Dr. Webb's research activities. I'm here to provide clarification that may resolve this matter efficiently." "Indeed, Mr. Thorne." "Your clarification?" Thorne opened his leather portfolio with practiced precision. "Doctor, Webb was not the victim of an elaborate murder plot. He was a man whose illegal activities finally attracted federal attention. Wednesday night, he met with FBI investigators who had been building a case against him for months. He handed Wolfe several official-looking documents. These are copies of correspondence between federal authorities and my office. Dr. Webb was offered immunity in exchange for full cooperation in exposing what the Bureau believes is a systematic theft of American agricultural research by foreign interests. Wolfe examined the papers with the thoroughness of a scholar reviewing ancient manuscripts. These suggest Dr. Webb was a victim of manipulation rather than a willing participant in espionage. Exactly. The Meridian deal was designed to legitimize stolen research and provide legal cover for the real criminals. Dr. Webb discovered this and agreed to cooperate with federal investigators. And his current whereabouts? Federal protective custody, pending the completion of their investigation. The Bureau felt his life was in danger once he agreed to testify. It was a neat story, complete with official documentation and plausible explanations. The only problem was that it directly contradicted the photographic evidence Sarah Chen had provided. After Thorne left, Wolfe sat in contemplative silence for several minutes, his fingers interlaced over his substantial middle. Finally, he spoke. "We now have 3 different versions of Dr. Webb's fate, Archie. Dr. Marsh believes he was murdered by someone seeking revenge for his betrayal. Miss Chen has photographic evidence of his death in his private greenhouse. Mr. Thorne claims he's alive and cooperating with federal investigators. Someone's lying. Everyone is lying in different ways and for different reasons, but only one of them is lying about the essential fact, whether Marcus Webb is alive or dead." The phone rang again at 1 o'clock. This time it was the familiar, electronically distorted voice. "Mr. Goodwin," the voice said, "I trust you've been enjoying our little performance. At 2:47 p.m. today, when Dr. Marsh's orchid opens its first bloom, you will learn the truth about Marcus Webb's fate. I suggest you gather all the players in your office. The final act requires a full cast." "We'll be ready," I said, but the line had already gone dead. Wolfe glanced at the orchid monitoring equipment on his desk, where digital displays showed the countdown. 1 hour and 37 minutes until bloom time. The bud in the plant rooms above was now fully developed, its exotic beauty concealing the deadly precision of someone's carefully orchestrated plan. "Contact Inspector Kramer," Wolfe instructed. "Inform him that we expect significant developments this afternoon and request his presence here at 2:30. Tell him we have reason to believe, Doctor. Webb's murder will be revealed at the precise moment an exotic orchid blooms. He'll think we've lost our minds. His curiosity will compel attendance nonetheless, and Archie, ensure that Dr. Marsh remains in the plant rooms with Theodore until the appointed time. When the orchid blooms, I want her where she can be seen and accounted for." As I made the final preparations for what promised to be the most precisely timed confrontation in my experience, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to witness something much more complex than a simple murder case. The federal documents, the surveillance, the photographic evidence. Someone had been orchestrating a performance that made grand opera look like amateur theater. But if there was one thing I'd learned in my years working for Nero Wolfe, it was that people who tried to cast him in their theatrical productions usually discovered he preferred to direct his own shows. The orchid would bloom at 2:47 p.m. Whether that moment would bring justice or catastrophe remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. Sunday afternoon was going to be very educational indeed. The stage was set, the actors were positioning themselves, and somewhere in the plant rooms above, a dark flower continued its inexorable countdown toward a moment that would either prevent a murder or reveal one that had already been committed with scientific precision. At 2:15 on Sunday afternoon, the red leather chair in Nero Wolfe's office had become the most dangerous seat in Manhattan. Not because it was uncomfortable, though many who had occupied it under Wolfe's methodical interrogation might argue otherwise, but because everyone entering the room understood that whoever sat there would be subjected to the kind of systematic dissection that had sent more than one murderer to the electric chair. The atmosphere in the brownstone was charged with the peculiar tension that comes when carefully constructed lies are about to collide with methodical truth. The orchid monitoring equipment on Wolfe's desk showed 32 minutes until bloom time, its digital countdown adding urgency to every word and gesture. Inspector Kramer arrived first at precisely 2:20, his weathered face wearing the expression of a man who had attended too many of Wolfe's theatrical revelations, but couldn't resist the possibility that this one might actually result in an arrest warrant. He settled into one of the yellow chairs with the resigned air of someone prepared for botanical nonsense but hoping for criminal clarity. "Goodwin," he growled, producing his unlit cigar. "This better end with handcuffs, not a lecture on plant biology. I've got a professor's car in the Hudson River and blood evidence that says he didn't drive it there himself." "You'll have your arrest, Inspector," Wolfe replied, settling into his chair with judicial dignity. "Murder, conspiracy, and federal fraud. The orchid merely provides the theatrical timing our killer found irresistible. Sterling Thorne entered at 2:25, his expensive suit and practiced demeanor suggesting someone who had spent the weekend preparing for legal warfare. He took the red leather chair without invitation, opening his leather portfolio with the precision of a surgeon arranging instruments. Dr. Clara Vance arrived at 2:28, her usual brisk efficiency frayed around the edges by 3 days of mounting pressure. She chose a chair near the window, her briefcase clutched like armor against whatever revelations the afternoon might bring. Sarah Chen slipped in at 2:30, her pale face and nervous energy suggesting someone carrying secrets too heavy for her slight frame. She took the chair closest to the door, as if planning a quick exit when the proceedings became uncomfortable. Benjamin Carter was conspicuously absent. My calls to him had gone unanswered, which was either suspicious or sensible, depending on your perspective. With his audience assembled, Wolfe surveyed the room with the satisfaction of a conductor preparing to begin a complex symphony. The listening device in his desk lamp hummed its electronic presence, a tiny ear waiting to transmit every carefully chosen word to whoever had planted it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wolfe began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "We are gathered to resolve a murder that was planned with scientific precision and executed with theatrical flair. In 28 minutes, Dr. Helena Marsh's Paphiopedilum thanatos will open its first bloom. At that moment, we will learn the truth about Dr. Marcus Webb's fate." "Mr. Wolfe," Sterling Thorne interrupted, "I've already provided documentation that Dr. Webb is alive and in federal protective custody. This Orchid timing is meaningless theatrical nonsense." "Is it, Mr. Thorne?" Wolfe's eyebrows rose slightly. "Then perhaps you can explain why Miss Chen received this yesterday morning." He nodded to me, and I handed him the photograph Sarah had brought. It shows Dr. Webb's body in his private greenhouse, photographed Wednesday night at 11:47 p.m. The effect was immediate and revealing. Thorne's practiced composure cracked slightly, Doctor. Vance leaned forward to examine the photograph, and Sarah Chen's hands began to tremble. The silence stretched until Kramer broke it. "That's evidence in a murder investigation," he said grimly. "Where did you get it?" "Someone placed it in Miss Chen's mailbox Friday afternoon," Wolfe replied. "No postmark, no return address. The sender wanted her to bring it to us, which she did. The question is why someone would provide evidence of Dr. Webb's death while Mr. Thorne was simultaneously claiming he was alive." Thorne's jaw tightened. The photograph could be fabricated. Digital manipulation is sophisticated these days. "Indeed it could be," Wolfe agreed, "which is why we must examine the totality of evidence. Archie, please share what we discovered in Dr. Webb's private greenhouse." I opened the folder containing Webb's financial records and journal entries. "Doctor, Webb was conducting unauthorized research and selling data to agricultural companies in violation of federal regulations. The payments were substantial, enough to fund years of illegal work. But more importantly, his final journal entries show he knew someone was planning to kill him. I read from Webb's journal. "Meeting tonight with all parties to resolve this. If something happens to me, the evidence is in this cabinet. The killer is someone who understood Helena's precision and decided to use it for their own theatrical purposes." "Written Wednesday," Wolfe added, "the day he disappeared. Dr. Webb knew he was walking into a trap, but he went anyway. Why? Because someone convinced him they could resolve the crisis peacefully." Dr. Vance shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Marcus was under enormous stress. His judgment may have been compromised." "His judgment was quite clear, Doctor." "Vance, as was his understanding of who posed the greatest threat to him." Wolfe's gaze moved systematically around the room. "Someone in this room has gone to extraordinary lengths to control the narrative of Dr. Webb's death. They arranged for surveillance of this house, attempted to poison my orchid collection, and installed listening devices to monitor our investigation." He gestured toward the desk lamp. I trust our electronic audience has found our discussions illuminating. We have been quite forthcoming about our discoveries, haven't we, Archie? Every detail, I confirmed, including the ones that identify the killer. The tension in the room was palpable now, like the air before a thunderstorm. The Orchid monitoring equipment showed 23 minutes until bloom time, its relentless countdown adding urgency to every revelation. The central deception in this case, Wolfe continued, is the assumption that Dr. Webb's death was timed to coincide with the Orchid's bloom. In fact, the opposite is true. Dr. Webb was murdered Wednesday night, and the Orchid's precise blooming schedule was used to create an elaborate alibi and frame an innocent person. Sarah Chen looked up sharply. What do you mean? I mean, Miss Chen, that someone discovered Dr. Marsh's experiment months ago and recognized its potential as the perfect timing mechanism for murder. They killed Dr. Webb Wednesday night, then orchestrated a complex deception to ensure his death would be revealed at exactly 2:47 p.m. today, when everyone would assume the murder had just occurred. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, his gaze penetrating. The killer needed three things: access to Dr. Webb's private activities, detailed knowledge of Dr. Marsh's research, and the institutional authority to manipulate evidence and witnesses. Only one person in this room possessed all three. Dr. Clara Vance's briefcase slipped from her grip, hitting the floor with a sharp crack that made everyone jump. Dr. Vance, Wolfe said quietly, you have been orchestrating this entire charade from the beginning. You discovered Dr. Webb's unauthorized research activities and saw an opportunity to eliminate a problem while protecting the university's interests in the Meridian deal. That's ridiculous, Dr. Vance said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? You had administrative oversight of Dr. Webb's activities. You knew about his illegal research, his affair with Miss Chen, and his growing instability. You also knew about Dr. Marsh's Orchid experiment because you approved her laboratory resources. When Dr. Webb threatened to confess everything and destroy the Meridian deal, you decided he had to die. Wolfe consulted his notes. Wednesday night, you lured Dr. Webb to his greenhouse for what you claimed would be a final negotiation. Instead, you killed him, probably with a concentrated plant toxin that would be difficult to detect among all those exotic specimens. Then you spent the next 3 days positioning evidence and witnesses to ensure the murder would be revealed at precisely 2:47 p.m. today. You have no proof of any of this, Dr. Vance said, but she was gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. Don't I? Wolfe nodded to me, and I produced the final piece of evidence. Mr. Panzer discovered this in your office yesterday evening. I held up a small vial containing what looked like concentrated plant extract. Genetic analysis will show it contains alkaloids from Nerium oleander, a common ornamental plant that produces cardiac glycosides fatal in small doses. The silence that followed was broken only by the electronic hum of the monitoring equipment. 18 minutes until bloom time. You killed Dr. Webb with oleander poisoning, Wolfe continued remorselessly. A poison that would be nearly impossible to detect in a greenhouse full of exotic plants. Then you arranged for the photograph to be delivered to Miss Chen, knowing she would bring it to us. You wanted witnesses to the precise timing, people who would remember that a murder was revealed at exactly 2:47 p.m. Dr. Vance's composure finally cracked completely. Marcus was going to destroy everything, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 15 years of building the department's reputation, the Meridian deal worth millions in research funding, the careers of dozens of faculty members, he was going to sacrifice it all to ease his guilty conscience. So you decided to ease it permanently. He was already dead professionally. The federal investigation would have destroyed him anyway. I just accelerated the timeline. Inspector Kramer rose from his chair, his hand moving to his handcuffs. Dr. Clara Vance, you're under arrest for the murder of Dr. Marcus Webb. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Dr. Vance looked directly at Wolfe with something that might have been professional respect. "You understood the precision," she said quietly. "Most people would never have seen the administrative elegance in the timing." "I understood the vanity," Wolfe replied. "You couldn't resist creating a murder that showcased your organizational skills. The precise timing, the evidence manipulation, the witness coordination. It was as much about demonstrating your competence as it was about protecting the university." After Inspector Kramer led Dr. Vance away, the office gradually emptied. Sterling Thorne departed to deal with the legal complications that would follow the arrest. Sarah Chen left to face her own reckoning with federal investigators regarding her participation in Webb's unauthorized research. In the plant rooms above, the Paphiopedilum thanatos opened its first bloom at exactly 2:47 p.m., revealing petals of deep purple striped with silver, beautiful, exotic, and completely innocent of the deadly purpose for which its timing had been borrowed. Theodore descended from the plant rooms with the satisfied expression of a man who had witnessed scientific precision triumph over human deception. "The orchid bloomed perfectly," he reported. "Nature keeps its appointments even when humans use them for unnatural purposes." As the sun set behind the brownstones of West 35th Street, Wolfe settled into his chair with the satisfaction of a conductor who had successfully guided a complex symphony to its proper conclusion. Fritz appeared in the doorway to announce that dinner would be served in 20 minutes, the brownstone returning to its natural rhythm. "An elegant murder," Wolfe observed, reaching for his beer, "ruined by the killer's need to demonstrate administrative efficiency." Dr. Vance could have simply poisoned Dr. Webb and disposed of the evidence quietly. Instead, she created a theatrical performance that required precise timing, multiple witnesses, and elaborate coordination, all of which provided the very clues that led to her capture. "She wanted credit for her organizational skills," I said, "even in murder. Especially in murder." She had spent her career managing complex academic bureaucracies with precision and efficiency. When she decided to kill, she couldn't resist applying the same methodical approach, scheduling the revelation, coordinating the evidence, managing the witnesses like a faculty committee meeting. But as I filed away the last of the case documents, I found myself thinking about the orchid blooming peacefully in the plant rooms above. Dr. Marsh had created it as a demonstration of scientific precision, never imagining that someone would borrow its timing for murder. Beauty and precision, corrupted by human ambition and institutional politics. The Paphiopedilum thanatos would continue blooming for several more days, a reminder that nature's precision can be borrowed but never truly controlled, and that those who try to schedule murder with scientific accuracy usually discover that justice keeps its own appointments, often more precisely than they anticipated. The case was closed, the orchid had bloomed on schedule, and dinner was waiting. In Nero Wolfe's world, that constituted a perfect ending to an imperfect crime. The departure of Inspector Kramer with Dr. Clara Vance in custody should have brought the satisfying conclusion that comes with justice served and order restored. Instead, as the echo of the front door closing faded through the brownstone, I found myself looking at the remaining occupants of Wolfe's office with the distinct feeling that the final act of our drama was just beginning. Sterling Thorne sat rigid in his chair, his expensive suit and practiced demeanor unable to conceal the fact that his carefully constructed legal edifice was crumbling around him. Sarah Chen remained pale and trembling near the window, her eyes fixed on some middle distance where her academic career used to exist. The orchid monitoring equipment on Wolfe's desk continued its electronic hum, now displaying the fulfilled promise. 2:47 p.m. had come and gone, and the Paphiopedilum thanatos had bloomed exactly as predicted. Wolfe surveyed his audience with the satisfaction of a conductor whose orchestra had just completed a particularly challenging symphony. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced over his substantial middle, and began what I recognized as his methodical dissection of the crime. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had just unraveled a masterpiece of deception, "we have witnessed a murder planned with scientific precision and executed with administrative efficiency. Dr. Vance's crime was not a moment of passion or desperation. It was a carefully orchestrated performance that used Dr. Marsh's botanical expertise as its timing mechanism." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "The central deception in this case was temporal. We were led to believe that Dr. Webb would be murdered at 2:47 p.m. today, when Dr. Marsh's orchid bloomed. In reality, Dr. Webb died Wednesday night, and the orchid's blooming schedule was used to create an elaborate theatrical revelation of his death." "But why the elaborate timing?" Sarah Chen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because Dr. Vance understood that precision creates credibility, Miss Chen. By linking the revelation of Dr. Webb's death to an unassailable scientific event, the blooming of a genetically modified orchid, she hoped to create a spectacle that would overshadow the true motives and methods of his murder." Wolfe began his systematic reconstruction of the crime, each detail falling into place with the inexorable logic that had made him the most feared detective in Manhattan. Dr. Vance discovered Dr. Marsh's orchid experiment months ago through her administrative oversight of laboratory resources. When Dr. Webb's illegal research activities and his intention to confess threatened to destroy the Meridian deal and implicate the entire university in federal violations, she recognized the orchid's precise timing as the perfect cover for murder. He gestured toward the monitoring equipment. Wednesday night, she lured Dr. Webb to his private greenhouse under the pretense of resolving the crisis. There, she killed him with concentrated oleander extract, a poison that would be nearly impossible to detect among the exotic plants in his greenhouse, and one that demonstrated her knowledge of botanical toxicology. The choice of weapon was both practical and symbolic, Wolfe continued. Oleander produces cardiac glycosides that cause death within hours, but the symptoms can be mistaken for natural cardiac events. In a greenhouse filled with potentially toxic plants, the presence of plant alkaloids would raise no immediate suspicions. Sterling Thorne shifted uncomfortably. "You have no proof of any of this. Dr. Vance's confession was made under duress." "Mr. Thorne," Wolfe interrupted with the patience of someone explaining elementary concepts to a slow student, "we have abundant proof. The vial of oleander extract Mr. Panzer discovered in Dr. Vance's office will match the alkaloids found in Dr. Webb's system. The surveillance equipment in the greenhouse will show her presence there Wednesday night, and most damning of all, we have her own meticulous planning documented in her administrative records." He opened a folder I hadn't seen before. "Dr. Vance's university calendar shows a meeting scheduled for Wednesday night at 11:30 p.m., listed only as Project Resolution. Her keycard records show access to the botany building that evening. Her university vehicle was signed out overnight and returned Thursday morning with additional mileage consistent with a trip to Dr. Webb's greenhouse." The systematic nature of the evidence was overwhelming, each piece building on the others to create an unassailable case. But Wolfe wasn't finished. After the murder, Dr. Vance had to ensure the body would be discovered at her chosen time. She cleaned the greenhouse professionally, removing immediate forensic evidence while leaving enough traces to confirm the location of death. She then drove Dr. Webb's car to the Hudson River, staged evidence of a struggle, and pushed it in, creating a missing person case that would occupy the police while she prepared her theatrical revelation. The photograph sent to Miss Chen was the centerpiece of her deception, Wolfe continued. High resolution, professionally lit, carefully composed, it was intended to serve as evidence that Dr. Webb was dead, while the timestamp of Wednesday night would later be dismissed as irrelevant when everyone assumed he died at 2:47 p.m. Sunday. Sarah Chen looked up sharply. But why send it to me? Because you were Dr. Webb's closest collaborator and most obvious suspect, Miss Chen. Dr. Vance needed someone to bring the photograph to us, someone whose panic and obvious involvement would make them appear guilty while simultaneously providing us with the evidence we needed to focus on the Sunday deadline. Wolfe's explanation continued with relentless precision. The fabricated threat letter and voicemail to Dr. Marsh served multiple purposes. They established the Orchid as the murder timer. They ensured Dr. Marsh would seek our help, and they created a paper trail that would implicate Dr. Marsh in the conspiracy while providing Dr. Vance with plausible distance from the crime. The trespass in this house was pure vanity, he said, his voice carrying a note of professional irritation. Doctor, Vance couldn't resist demonstrating her capability to reach into my sanctuary and leave her mark. The rotation of the Orchid, the replacement of the threat letter, the precise timing label, all were calculated to show her control while removing any forensic evidence that might trace back to her. The listening device and surveillance operation fell into place as part of the same administrative precision. Dr. Vance needed to monitor our progress to ensure we were following her script. When our investigation threatened to expose her prematurely, she escalated to direct action. The attempted poisoning of my orchid collection was both retaliation and contingency planning. Her ultimate goal, Wolfe concluded, was not merely to kill Dr. Webb, but to destroy Dr. Marsh's reputation and credibility while protecting the university's involvement in the Meridian deal. By making the Orchid central to the murder, she hoped to create a spectacle that would overshadow the true financial crimes and cast Dr. Marsh as either the killer or an unwitting accomplice to the timing. The silence that followed was profound. Sterling Thorne sat with the deflated posture of someone whose legal strategies had just been systematically demolished. Sarah Chen stared at her hands, finally understanding the full scope of her manipulation. But she made one crucial error, Wolfe said, reaching for his beer with the satisfaction of someone who had just completed a particularly challenging crossword puzzle. Dr. Vance treated murder as an administrative project, complete with schedules, procedures, and quality control measures. Her intellectual arrogance demanded that even her crime demonstrate her organizational superiority. That precision was her downfall, I observed. Precisely, Archie. A simple poisoning in a greenhouse would have been nearly impossible to solve, but Dr. Vance couldn't resist creating a masterpiece of timing and coordination that required so many moving parts, it inevitably revealed its architect. After the remaining participants had departed, Thorne to face federal investigators, Sarah Chen to confront her own legal complications, the brownstone settled into its natural rhythm. Theodore descended from the plant rooms to report that the Paphiopedilum thanatos was blooming magnificently, its dark purple petals striped with silver, completely innocent of the deadly purpose for which its timing had been borrowed. Fritz appeared in the doorway to announce that dinner would be served in 20 minutes, the brownstone returning to its sacred routine. The Orchid monitoring equipment was finally silent, its countdown complete, its promise fulfilled with botanical honesty. An instructive case, Wolfe observed, settling deeper into his chair. Dr. Vance possessed formidable intelligence and administrative capability. Had she applied those talents to legitimate pursuits, she might have achieved genuine distinction. Instead, she chose to use her precision and organizational skills for murder. She wanted credit for her competence, I said, even in crime, especially in crime. She had spent her career managing complex academic bureaucracies with efficiency and precision. When she decided to kill, she couldn't resist applying the same methodical approach, scheduling the revelation, coordinating the evidence, managing the witnesses like a faculty committee meeting. He reached for his beer, his dark eyes reflecting satisfaction. But she failed to understand that true precision serves truth, not deception. Dr. Marsh's orchid bloomed exactly when predicted because it was designed to demonstrate scientific honesty. Dr. Vance's elaborate deception collapsed because it was built on lies that required increasingly complex coordination to maintain. As I filed away the last of the case documents, I found myself thinking about the orchid blooming peacefully in the plant rooms above. Dr. Marsh had created it as a demonstration of scientific precision, never imagining that someone would borrow its timing for murder. Beauty and precision, corrupted by human ambition and institutional greed. The Paphiopedilum thanatos would continue blooming for several more days, a reminder that nature's precision can be borrowed but never truly controlled, and that those who try to schedule murder with scientific accuracy usually discover that justice keeps its own appointments, often more precisely than they anticipated. The case was closed. The orchid had bloomed on schedule, and dinner was waiting. In Nero Wolfe's world, that constituted a perfect ending to an imperfect crime. The only sound was the gentle ticking of the mantel clock, counting off the moments of a restored peace that would last until the next client arrived with their own impossible problem. Dr. Vance had tried to use botanical precision as a cover for administrative murder. Instead, she had discovered that true precision, like justice itself, ultimately serves truth rather than deception. The orchid had kept its promise. So had Nero Wolfe. The brownstone is built to absorb trouble and exhale tranquility, like one of Fritz's soufflés rising in perfect silence after the oven door closes. By Monday evening, 48 hours after the Paphiopedilum thanatos had bloomed with scientific precision and revealed a murder planned with administrative arrogance, that familiar peace had settled over West 35th Street like a well-tailored coat. I was in the office dismantling the last traces of our electronic invasion. The listening device from Wolfe's desk lamp now lay in pieces in my desk drawer, a small monument to Dr. Vance's meticulous yet ultimately self-defeating precision. The orchid monitoring equipment had been removed, its digital countdown replaced by the familiar clutter of correspondence and botanical journals that marked the office's return to its natural state. From the plant rooms above came the gentle whir of ventilation systems and Theodore's satisfied humming, sure signs that his domain had been restored to proper order. The Paphiopedilum thanatos continued its magnificent bloom, deep purple petals striped with silver, completely innocent of the deadly purpose for which its timing had been borrowed. Wolfe emerged from his evening session with the orchids at 6 o'clock sharp, settling into his chair with the contentment of a man whose universe had been properly realigned. He opened the evening mail with judicial precision, pausing only to examine a telegram from Inspector Kramer. "The final details," he said, passing me the message. "Dr. Vance has confessed comprehensively. Oleander glycosides confirmed in Dr. Webb's tissue samples. The federal investigation has expanded to include agricultural espionage on an international scale. Miss Chen has negotiated immunity in exchange for cooperation. Mr. Thorne faces disciplinary action but will avoid criminal charges. And Benjamin Carter, reinstated with full apologies and a research grant. Justice, it seems, occasionally remembers to be thorough." As if summoned by our discussion, the doorbell announced a visitor. I found Dr. Helena Marsh on our stoop, carrying a small, wrapped in familiar tissue paper. She looked more at peace than I'd seen her since this whole affair began. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, settling into the red leather chair, "I wanted to thank you personally and to give you this." She handed him the package. "It's a cutting from the original Paphiopedilum thanatos. Theodore suggested you might want to cultivate your own specimen." Wolfe accepted the gift with the reverence most people reserve for religious artifacts. "A generous offering, Dr. Marsh. Theodore will be honored to nurture it. The hybrid will bloom annually now, every October at precisely 2:47 p.m., she said with quiet satisfaction. A reminder that some schedules are kept by nature rather than human ambition. Indeed, your orchid demonstrated that precision serves truth, not deception. Dr. Vance borrowed your scientific honesty for her administrative murder, but the flower itself remained incorruptible. After Dr. Marsh departed, leaving behind her gift and gratitude, I made one final call of the day. Benjamin Carter answered on the second ring, his voice carrying a lightness that hadn't been there a week ago. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "I wanted to thank Mr. Wolfe. The university has not only reinstated me, but offered a research position. Someone sent them copies of my original work, the material from before Webb's accusations. Symmetries, I told him. Mr. Wolfe arranges them when he can. Please tell him I'm grateful, and that I understand now why he works from a chair. When you can orchestrate justice without leaving your office, why stand?" At 7:30, Fritz appeared with his customary announcement. "Dinner is served. Côtelette d'agneau aux haricots verts, pomme Anna, and a soufflé au grand marnier that will not wait for murderers, botanists, or even the most precise of orchids." Over dinner, Fritz's lamb was perfection, as always. Wolfe offered his final reflection on the case that had brought murder to the brownstone and botanical precision to criminal investigation. "The essential lesson, Archie, is that complexity serves justice only when it reveals truth. Dr. Vance created an elaborate murder plot that demonstrated her administrative capabilities, but ultimately provided the very evidence needed to convict her. She was too smart for her own good. She was too proud for her own safety. Intelligence without humility becomes arrogance, and arrogance demands recognition, even in murder." He cut his lamb with surgical precision. She treated time as a servant rather than understanding it as a court. Time sits whenever it pleases and admits whatever is true. Dr. Vance thought she could appoint it her clerk. Instead, it arraigned her. The soufflé arrived as promised, light as justice and sweet as vindication. As we savored Fritz's culinary precision, I found myself thinking about the orchid blooming peacefully upstairs, keeping its annual appointment with beauty and truth, indifferent to the human, ambitions that had briefly made it an unwitting accomplice to murder. After dinner, I took my customary tour of the premises. The street outside had returned to its normal rhythm. Cabs, pedestrians, the city conducting its ancient business. The door locks were content, the safe secure, the little drawer where the dismantled listening device now resided among paper clips and rubber bands. When I returned to the office, Wolfe was contemplating the orchid cutting through memory rather than sight, a habit of his that suggested deep satisfaction with the natural order of things. "Archie," he said without opening his eyes, "send Inspector Kramer a dozen Paphiopedilum wardii on my account." I stared at him. "Orchids?" To Kramer. "He waters geraniums with a cigar. The petals in Dr. Webb's car vexed him. Let him see them alive. It may improve his appreciation for botanical precision. If the NYPD starts a greenhouse, your conscience will bother you." "My conscience," he said with the ghost of a smile, "is untroubled by horticultural evangelism." As the mantel clock chimed 9, the brownstone settled into its evening rhythm. Theodore's footsteps overhead provided a steady counterpoint to the city's distant hum. Fritz moved quietly in the kitchen, preparing for tomorrow's culinary campaign. The orchid cutting sat in its place of honor, waiting for Theodore's morning attention. "Do you want the Times?" I asked. "Tomorrow," Wolfe said, his eyes still closed. "Tonight, I prefer the minimal company of successful digestion and restored order." The case was closed. The orchid had bloomed on schedule, and dinner had been perfect. In Nero Wolfe's world, that constituted not just a satisfactory ending, but a reminder that precision, properly applied, serves truth rather than deception, and that justice, like nature itself, keeps its own appointments with mathematical certainty. The Paphiopedilum thanatos would bloom again next October at exactly 2:47 p.m., an annual reminder that some schedules are kept by forces more reliable than human ambition. Dr. Vance had tried to borrow botanical precision for administrative murder, and discovered that when you attempt to run a crime on nature's schedule, you'd better not plan it across Nero Wolfe's investigation. The brownstone was at peace, the murderer was behind bars, and somewhere in the plant rooms above, an exotic orchid continued its ancient cycle of growth and beauty, indifferent to the human dramas that occasionally borrowed its precision for darker purposes. Justice, like the orchid, had kept its appointment